Firstly, I love sleep, but I also love being productive. And it never feels like there are enough hours in the day, especially when you spend half of them feeling tired and exhausted. I was sick of hitting snooze countless times and then forcing myself to roll out of bed 5 minutes before work started. Or, let's be honest, when I was working from home, 5 minutes after work started. But one day I decided to wake up early, and when I realized that I could create a magical extra 2 hours in my day just for me, I was determined to keep it going. But how do you wake up earlier without feeling like a zombie? Well, I have learned so much about sleep through books and YouTubers and trying things out for myself. Some of these hacks worked for a short amount of time, and these might be all you need to wake up early. Using loud music for my alarm, having the heating turned on automatically in winter, or plugging in my phone on the other side of the room. But this video is going to go over everything that has actually helped me to wake up early consistently. My first tip is one of the most helpful tips that I hear almost nobody talking about, and that is that you might be sleeping 30 minutes too long. Yes, too long. That could be what's causing you to feel tired and sluggish in the morning and making it 10 times harder to get out of bed. And it sounds weird, doesn't it? How does sleeping longer make you more tired? But it's honestly such a simple hack that makes sense once you understand your sleep cycle. Humans have, on the most part, a 90-minute sleep cycle, give or take 20 minutes. It might take some trial and error or a smartwatch to determine the approximate length of your sleep cycle. But we're going to base the examples in this video on the average 90-minute cycle. So what happens if you go to bed at 11 p.m. and set your alarm for 7 a.m.? That's 8 hours of sleep, right? The perfect amount of sleep according to almost everyone. However, if your sleep cycle is like mine and it goes for 90 minutes, this is how your night goes. 11 p.m. to 12:30 to 2 to 3:30 to 5 to 6:30 to 8. If your alarm is set for 7 a.m., you're halfway through a new sleep cycle when those bells start ringing. You've passed your window of wake time. So instead, if you set your alarm half an hour earlier at 6:30, it will be waking you up at the end of a sleep cycle when you're at your most awake. Let's use another example. Let's say you need to wake up at 6 a.m. Then if we work backwards using the 90-minute cycle, the best time to go to bed would be either 10:30 or 12. An important side note for this tip is that if you happen to wake up 10 minutes before your alarm, do not, and I repeat, do not go back to sleep, because you might think you're going to sleep for an extra 10 minutes, but your body thinks you're going to sleep for an extra 90. Once you're back asleep, you'll gradually be getting deeper and deeper into sleep, and therefore it's harder to wake up. So it's always best if you naturally wake up a little bit before your alarm to get up straight away. And the same goes for the snooze button. If your alarm wakes you up, try to avoid hitting the snooze button. As tempting as it is, I know. Don't get me wrong, I still hit the snooze button, but I've observed myself and I know for a fact I feel much more awake than if I snooze for an extra 10 or 20 minutes, or 30 or 40. Now, before I move on to the other tips, I want to first highlight the other half of the sleep cycle situation. The first tip is about what time to set your alarm and wake up in the morning. This tip is about what time to go to sleep. So I kept noticing that I would get really tired at 8:30 p.m. on the dot every night. It wasn't time for bed yet, but I would get tired for about 20 minutes and then I would go back to being wide awake. Then at about 10 p.m, I would feel another wave of tiredness. Do you see the pattern? 8:30 and then 10. That's 90 minutes. Those waves of tiredness are following the same pattern as my sleep cycle. You may have experienced that feeling when you get beyond tired. You might have been tired at 10 p.m, but you stayed up a bit longer and now it's time for sleep. You're back to wide awake again. That's probably because you missed your sleep window. In order to get to sleep faster, try to acknowledge when you start to feel a wave of tiredness and ride that wave to sleep. Once it's missed, it might be another hour and a half before you can catch another wave. This is probably a factor as to why you're lying there wide awake at night for so long. Don't let that window pass by. So what I do each night is I listen to my body to determine what time to go to sleep, and then I adjust my morning alarm just slightly to account for the difference in my wake window. Okay, so your sleep cycle is only part of the equation. I have more tips to share to provide a more holistic system to sleeping well and waking up early. So moving on to the rest of the tips. Light plays a huge role in your circadian rhythm, and I have 4 tips to help you use this to your advantage. My first tip is that I never use my overhead lighting beyond 8:30 p.m. at night. Usually after I finish the dishes after dinner, I keep my light exposure to a minimum, and I only use the warm tone lights around my house, so lamps and pendant lights. Every time that I go to someone's house and I stay late and they've got the overhead lights on, I don't get tired at all. I stay up way later than I normally would because my body isn't getting those signals that it's nighttime and time for sleep. Your body will give you signals that you're tired if you're not confusing it by keeping the bright lights on. The second tip is that exposing your eyes to light in the morning helps you to regulate your circadian rhythm, meaning that if you go for a morning walk or you sit outside for 10 minutes in the morning, then you're likely to find it easier to fall asleep and wake up at the same times. I got in the habit of going for morning walks every day in the summer, and I started to naturally wake up without even using an alarm. If you live somewhere that doesn't have light early in the morning, then using artificial lights like sun lamps or Bluetooth connected light bulbs can do the trick. If the sun does start to rise prior to or around the time you wake up, then I highly recommend keeping your blinds and curtains open. Obviously, privacy is important, so be careful depending where your windows are located in your bedroom, but if it's possible, try to keep your blinds and curtains open overnight. This way, as the sun begins to rise in the morning, it will naturally wake you up. Sometimes I forget when I've accidentally closed my blind, and I find it so much harder to wake up on those mornings. And I'm confused as well. I'm like, why am I so tired? And then I realize, oh, I didn't have any light exposure. My room was so dark, and so my body thought it was still the middle of the night. So blind open was a game changer for me. My last tip regarding light is an obvious one, but an important one. And it is to dim your screens and use nightlight settings on your devices to help remove any excess blue light. If you have blue light glasses, you can use those, but I usually just have my brightness down to the lowest setting and use dark mode. All right, moving on from lighting to sound. I want to talk a bit about anxiety and how disruptive this can be for sleep. Obviously, there are varying degrees of severity, and if this is something that has been impacting your life, I highly recommend seeking help. My experience with anxiety is mainly just a lot of thinking that happens at night before sleep. Most of the time, we're on the go all day, and then when it's time to sleep, that's when it all gets put away and we're left with just our thoughts. That can be confronting when we're used to that space being filled. If you're finding this happens to you, a few side recommendations for anxiety. Trying to find time during the day to journal in order to process your anxious thoughts before sleep. The other tip is to try meditation in order to slow your thoughts down. Meditation can be practiced in sitting with your thoughts in order to get used to that feeling, so that bedtime is not the only time that you have to sit with your thoughts. But the main thing that I use when my thoughts are running rampant at night is sound. I know that everyone is different, so do what works for you in this department. I know that I used to be a person that needed absolute silence to sleep, and now I actually struggle with silence and prefer sound. I haven't had that much anxiety lately with all of the mindset work I've been doing, but my thoughts still go wild at night nonetheless. Thinking about projects I'm working on, or conversations I've had, or the fact that all animals have the same hair color as humans. So having some kind of noise helps to drown out the thoughts a bit. It sort of fills your mind so it's not able to think as much. It still can, trust me, it doesn't stop, but it can't think as easily or freely when there's sound taking up some of the space. Depending on how fast my thoughts are going or how awake I feel, I have 3 levels of sound that I listen to. Either rain or ocean sounds, a Headspace sleepcast,
Hello there.
or the first Harry Potter audiobook. Now, I want to insert a warning here. Make sure that you have the 15-minute automatic timer set if you're using Audible, and do not play any chapters with Voldemort. Trust me, when the book becomes part of your dream in those moments, it is not fun. Okay, so those are my main tips. Understanding your sleep cycle so you know when to go to sleep and when to wake up. Learn about how light can impact your circadian rhythm, and you can use sound to counteract anxious or rambling thoughts at night. Maybe you've tried 1 or 2 of these tips before, but it's in combination that they might have a lasting impact. All right, it's bonus tip time. There's an important thing I want to note about consistency. I don't think it's necessarily about going to sleep at a consistent time, but about getting to bed at a consistent time. I think sometimes people feel this pressure of they get to bed and they're not tired and they're like, oh, but I need to get to sleep at this time in order to wake up this time and keep that consistency. But if you're able to get to bed roughly at the same time each night and have screenless time, maybe reading a book, then your body will naturally give you signs when you're getting tired. and that is your optimal time to go to sleep. When you do go to bed and wake up at consistent times, especially if you get light exposure in the morning, your body clock will often wake you up for you. My lucky last bonus tip is to try to plan something you're genuinely excited to do first thing in the morning. If you're getting up extra early, I know it's tempting to try and be super productive. This is a good tip if you're starting out trying to get up early. Instead of trying to plan something really productive or some kind of thing that you think is a self-care task, use this first moment in the morning to do something that you're so excited about that you want to get out of bed to do. Think of it like Christmas morning when you were young. You weren't snoozing that alarm multiple times and struggling to get out of bed. You were springing up out of bed as soon as you realized you were awake because it was Christmas morning. Find a project that you're passionate about or a fun activity that you've been wanting to do for ages and make that the thing that is on your list first thing in the morning. But you only get to do it if you wake up early enough. So that was my last tip, but I did have a caveat that I wanted to add, and that is that I don't drink coffee. So I haven't done much research into the effects that coffee has on sleep. However, if you do drink coffee, I highly recommend looking into what time you should have your last caffeinated coffee for the day, and also the research about delaying your morning coffee to help minimize the 2 to 3 p.m. slump. However, in saying that, I also get 2 to 3 p.m. slumps and I don't drink coffee at all. So take everything with a grain of salt. Try things for yourself and see what works and what doesn't for you. And the same goes for all of the tips in this video. After making a change, or several, note it down now so that you can look back at it in the future. Share any tips that you have on waking up earlier in the comments below, and let's all collectively help each other get a better night's sleep. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.